gospel or soul, as it's called, is something that you feel from within and you do it.
Well, it's always surreal. My life is surreal. You know, it's a fairy tale that happened to have.
Berry Gordy, you promised us 4 consecutive #1 records, and you delivered them all.
Berry Gordy gave us Motown. He helped make stars like Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, and Stevie Wonder. But behind the music and success, there were secrets and pain. Some say he was a genius. Others say he controlled too much and hurt the very people he helped make famous. There were love affairs, fights over money, and artists who walked away feeling used. Was he a hero, a villain, or maybe both? To understand the truth, we have to go back to the beginning. Before the fame, before the stars, before Motown changed music forever. This is the story of Berry Gordy, the man behind the hits, and he-man who made history and left behind a lot of questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, the founder of Motown Records, Mr. Berry Gordy Jr.
Berry Gordy Jr., born on November 28, 1929 in Detroit, Michigan, was the 7th of 8 children in a family that valued entrepreneurship and hard work. Initially aspiring to be a professional boxer, Gordy dropped out of high school in the 11th grade to pursue this dream. He achieved a respectable record, winning 13 of 19 professional bouts. However, his boxing career was interrupted when he was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1951. During the Korean War, after serving until 1953, Gordy returned to Detroit and opened the 3D Record Mart, a jazz record store. Unfortunately, the store was unsuccessful, leading him to work on the assembly line at the Lincoln Mercury plant. During his time at the factory, Gordy's passion for music reignited. He began writing songs, and his talent soon caught the attention of singer Jackie Wilson. Gordy co-wrote several hits for Wilson, including Reet Petite and Lonely Teardrops.
Ladies and gentlemen, the founder of Motown Records, Mr. Berry Gordy Jr.
Marking the beginning of his illustrious career in the music industry, Motown is remembered as the sound that changed America. It gave the world legends like Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Diana Ross, the Supremes, the Temptations, and the Jackson 5. But behind the groundbreaking music and glittering stardom stood one man, Berry Gordy, whose control over every aspect of the label was both the engine of its success and the root of controversy. Gordy ran Motown like a machine. Inspired by his time on Detroit's Ford assembly line, he built a system where songs, singers, producers, and even dance moves were carefully molded to fit a commercial formula. Nothing was left to chance. Artists attended charm school to learn how to behave, dress, and speak publicly. Stage presence was rehearsed. Lyrics were tweaked for crossover appeal. The music was polished to perfection. But that perfection came with a price. Many artists later said they felt creatively boxed in. Motown's hit factory model left little room for experimentation or artistic freedom. Marvin Gaye, once Motown's golden boy, famously clashed with Gordy over his protest album What's Going On, which Gordy initially rejected for being too political. Gaye eventually won, but only after a battle. Financial control was another sore spot. Motown signed many of its artists when they were young and inexperienced. While their songs topped charts and made millions for the label, some performers later revealed they received little compensation in return. Royalties were minimal. Ownership of music masters remained with the company. Artists like the Four Tops and the Temptations would go on to say they never really knew how much money they made, or didn't make, under Gordy's leadership. Even Diana Ross, Gordy's longtime muse and romantic partner, wasn't exempt from this. Some insiders claimed her solo career was tightly managed to protect the label's image and Gordy's own interests. He chose the songs, the branding, the direction. For better or worse, he shaped careers with the same authority he used to protect his empire. To Berry Gordy, it was all about the bigger picture. A black-owned company dominating white radio, building stars who could walk into any room in America and command respect. He protected that vision fiercely. But many artists years later would ask, At what cost?
It was a great fight, and it's hard to predict this time. I mean, I know Ali a little better, and I think that his boxing skill is, he should.
Berry Gordy's relationship with Diana Ross was one of Motown's most powerful and most controversial. What began as professional mentorship turned romantic behind the scenes, fueling accusations of favoritism that deeply impacted the Supremes and Motown's internal dynamics.
Diana Ross she's classy. Diana Ross when the lights come on.
As Ross became the face of the group, tensions rose. In 1967, the group was officially renamed Diana Ross and the Supremes, sidelining founding members Florence Ballard and Mary Wilson. Ballard, frustrated and allegedly forced out, later struggled with poverty and died tragically at just 32. Many saw her fate as a consequence of Gordy's obsession with pushing Ross to stardom. Gordy's personal investment in Ross extended far beyond music. The two had a daughter in 1971, and he poured Motown's full weight behind Ross's solo career. From hit records to Hollywood roles, other artists felt neglected, and whispers of favoritism became impossible to ignore. Diana Ross soared, but the cost was high. Broken friendships, bitterness within the label, and a lingering question: did Gordy create a star or crown one he was personally invested in?
The Motown family mourns the death of our friend and brother, Michael Jackson, who was like a son.
The Jackson 5 were a Motown phenomenon. 5 young brothers from Gary, Indiana, led by a child prodigy named Michael. When they arrived at Motown in 1968, Berry Gordy immediately recognized something rare. Michael had the voice, the charisma, and the presence of someone far beyond his years. Gordy helped shape their image, their music, and their public persona, turning them into international superstars almost overnight. Under Motown, the Jackson 5 delivered hit after hit. I Want You Back, ABC, I'll Be There. Their explosive popularity rivaled even the Beatles, and for a while, they were Motown's crown jewel. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. Despite their success, the Jacksons grew frustrated. Their contracts gave them little control over their music. They couldn't write or produce their own songs, and their creative input was minimal. Michael, in particular, began to feel boxed in. As he matured, he wanted to experiment, to evolve. But Motown's tightly controlled system left no room for that. The final blow came in 1975, when the Jacksons made the difficult decision to leave Motown and sign with Epic Records. The move devastated Gordy. He had invested personally and professionally in the group, especially in Michael, who was becoming a solo force. To make things worse, legal battles over the name Jackson 5 forced the group to rebrand as the Jacksons.
When I had you to myself, I don't want you around.
Only Jermaine stayed behind, partly out of loyalty to Motown, but also because he had married Gordy's daughter, Hazel. For Berry Gordy, it was more than a business loss. It was personal. He had seen himself as a mentor, even a father figure to Michael. Their bond would never fully recover. For Michael Jackson, however, it was the beginning of a new chapter. One where he would finally take creative control and build the legacy that made him the king of pop. The Jackson 5's departure marked a turning point for Motown, a moment when one of its brightest stars outgrew the system that created him.
There's happiness before, during, and after success. Before is easy, during is easy.
Berry Gordy built an empire. He turned a small Detroit label into one of the most powerful cultural forces in American history. Through Motown, he launched the careers of icons, broke racial barriers, and brought black music into the mainstream like no one before him. On paper, his legacy is cemented, but as time passed, that legacy came under fire. Critics and artists alike began to question how Gordy ran his empire. Not just what he built, but how he built it. Allegations of financial exploitation, creative control, and emotional manipulation became hard to ignore. Many Motown artists, including major names like Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, and The Temptations, spoke publicly about feeling creatively stifled or financially shortchanged. The tightly controlled hit factory model that made Motown a success also left many artists feeling disposable once they stopped generating hits. Some, like Florence Ballard of the Supremes, were pushed aside and never recovered. Others, like Michael Jackson, had to walk away entirely to gain freedom. Even within the black community, Gordy's legacy has sparked debate. Was he a visionary who changed music forever? Or a businessman who prioritized profits over people? Was Motown an artistic revolution? Or a finely tuned machine built on tight contracts and even tighter control? In his later years, Gordy has been celebrated with Lifetime Achievement Awards and honors. He's often described as a genius, a pioneer, a cultural hero. But behind the applause lies a complicated truth that the road to greatness was littered with broken deals, bruised egos, and personal sacrifices. So, was it all worth it? For some, the answer is yes. Without Berry Gordy, there is no Motown. There is no Marvin, no Stevie, no Diana, no Michael. At least, not in the same way. For others, it's not so simple. The music lives on, but so do the wounds. Gordy once said, "I wanted to be the best. Not just the best black label, the best label, period." In many ways, he achieved that. But how history judges his methods, that's still being written. Berry Gordy is a name etched into the DNA of American music. Without him, the soundtracks to our lives, the voices of Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross, The Temptations, and the Jackson 5 might never have reached us the way they did. He didn't just run a record label. He engineered a cultural movement. He proved that a black-owned business could dominate the global music industry with style, vision, and discipline. But for all the history he made, the applause he earned, and the doors he opened, there's a darker narrative just beneath the surface. Berry Gordy was a perfectionist, a businessman, a strategist. And like many who build empires, he didn't always care who got left behind. There are too many stories of artists who felt creatively smothered, financially shortchanged, or emotionally discarded. Motown gave them the spotlight, but often kept the controls behind the curtain. Was Gordy a villain? Number. But he wasn't just a hero either. He was both a visionary who saw potential in voices others ignored, and a calculating operator who made sure every piece of the puzzle served the big picture, Motown, and him. That duality is why his story still matters. Because behind every success is sacrifice. Behind every hit record is a fight for ownership, respect, and recognition. And behind every icon Berry Gordy helped shape is a human being who sometimes paid the price for their fame. In the end, Gordy's legacy is complex, just like the music he helped create. It's harmony and conflict, genius and ego, triumph and tragedy, visionary, villain, or both. Maybe the real truth is that Berry Gordy was never meant to fit into a single category. Because like Motown itself, he was a man who redefined the rules, broke barriers, and left behind a legacy that still sparks debate to this day.